To the adoring public of Hollywood's golden age, they were the perfect couple: Robert Taylor, the handsome all-American leading man, and Barbara Stanwyck, the fiercely talented independent woman. Their marriage was sold as a fairy tale romance, a union of two of the brightest stars in the Hollywood sky. They were elegant, successful, and by all outward appearances, deeply in love. Their smiles graced magazine covers, their public appearances were legendary, and their sprawling ranch home was depicted as a private paradise. But according to stories that emerged years later, as he approached the final chapter of his life, a dying Robert Taylor allegedly began to let the carefully polished facade slip, revealing a far more complicated reality behind their celebrated union. Through candid conversations with those closest to him, a different narrative took shape. It wasn't a simple story of love, but a tale of secrets, lies, and a desperate studio plot to hide who they both really were. This is the story of the marriage that many believe was never meant to be, a partnership forged not in passion, but in the cold, calculating heart of the studio system. In the 1930s and 40s, nobody defined masculine beauty quite like Robert Taylor. Born Spangler Arlington Brugg in Nebraska, he was molded by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer into the ultimate Hollywood heartthrob. Dubbed the man with the perfect profile, he was, to millions of moviegoers, the ideal American man: decent, reliable, and impossibly handsome. Fans didn't just admire him, they crawled through his shrubbery and tore at his clothing, all for a chance to be near him. Barbara Stanwyck, on the other hand, was a force of nature forged in a brutal Brooklyn childhood. Born Ruby Stevens and orphaned at 4, she clawed her way from the chorus line to Broadway and then to Hollywood. She was armed with a raw talent and fierce determination that made her one of the most respected actresses of her generation. She wasn't just a star, she was a survivor. Their paths crossed in 1936. Stanwyck was recovering from a traumatic first marriage to the abusive actor Frank Fay, an experience that left her wary of romance. Robert Taylor, 4 years her junior, was Hollywood's rising golden boy. Friends arranged a blind dinner date, and despite her hesitation, Stanwyck went. The chemistry was immediate. For Stanwyck, Taylor was a polite, old-fashioned gentleman, a breath of fresh air after her first husband's cruelty. For the still unseasoned Taylor, Stanwyck was a powerhouse. As an established star, she could mentor him and help add depth to performances often criticized as being based on looks alone. A comfortable romance blossomed, and they soon bought adjoining ranches, creating a shared world away from prying eyes. Theirs was a relationship built on stability and companionship. Stanwyck, ever the dominant personality, even gave him the nickname Junior. But in the golden age of Hollywood, a star's private life was never their own. The studios, governed by the strict morality of the Hays Code, held immense power. An exposé in the January 1939 issue of Photoplay magazine, bluntly titled Hollywood's Unmarried Husbands and Wives, turned up the heat. The article publicly called out celebrity couples living together without a marriage license, a practice then considered scandalous. Stanwyck and Taylor were featured prominently. The message from the studio and the public was clear: get married or face the consequences. The pressure was on, but behind the scenes, many biographers believe a more urgent motivation was at play, one that would turn their comfortable romance into a carefully constructed cage. Whispers had been circulating for years, the kind of hushed, career-ending rumors that terrified studio chiefs like MGM's Louis B. Mayer. In the sanitized world of 1930s Hollywood, where a star's image was their most valuable asset, even a hint of deviance could mean ruin. The Photoplay article was a convenient excuse, but many Hollywood historians now believe the real reason the studio needed them married was to conceal what many in Hollywood's inner circles already suspected: that neither of them was straight. Barbara Stanwyck was, according to her biographer Axel Madsen, widely considered a closeted lesbian in Hollywood. It was a rumor she guarded with ferocious intensity. Stanwyck's tough take-charge persona, both on and off-screen, fueled the speculation. She often favored a more androgynous style, and her closest friends were frequently gay. Madsen himself admits that finding definitive proof is nearly impossible, but he asserts it was something that everybody in town seemed to know. Robert Taylor had a similar problem. In an era that equated masculinity with rugged imperfection, Taylor was, as some gossiped, almost too handsome. His flawless features led to whispers about his virility, spawning rumors that he might be gay. For MGM, these rumors were a potential catastrophe. Robert Taylor wasn't just an actor. He was their premier male star, and any scandal could cost the studio millions. This is where the fairy tale romance curdles into what many now see as a sordid business arrangement. The marriage of Robert Taylor and Barbara Stanwyck is widely considered by film historians to be a classic example of a lavender marriage, a union of convenience orchestrated by the studio to protect its stars. By forcing them to the altar, MGM's iron-fisted boss, Louis B. Mayer, could solve two problems at once. The marriage would end the talk of them living in sin, and more importantly, serve as a public performance of heterosexuality, crushing the persistent rumors about their orientations. And so, on May 14, 1939, they reluctantly went along with the plan. The studio arranged a quiet ceremony in San Diego, far from the Hollywood press. There was no grand passion, no romantic elopement. It was a transaction. One story, often repeated in Hollywood lore, underscores the alleged emptiness of the union. It said that Robert Taylor did not spend his wedding night with his new bride, but with his mother. True or not, the marriage was, by many accounts, a lie from the very first day. A marriage built on studio pressure was destined to crack. While the public saw a glamorous power couple behind the gates of their ranch, the reality was a slow collapse defined by an imbalance of power and emotional distance. Stanwyck, the self-made survivor, had mentored Taylor in his early career and continued to treat him less like a husband and more like a project. Friends observed that she mothered and bossed him around, a dynamic the confrontation-averse Taylor seemed to accept. But as his own career gained momentum, he no longer needed her guidance, and her control began to chafe. Within 2 years, the facade suffered its first major blow. In 1941, while filming Johnny Eager, Robert Taylor was cast opposite the luminous 20-year-old Lana Turner. Their on-screen chemistry was electric, and it quickly ignited a real-life fire. Taylor became completely infatuated. In his own words, he confessed, "I couldn't take my eyes off her, and there were times during the filming of Johnny Eager that I thought I would explode." The affair escalated, and Taylor, apparently willing to detonate his sham marriage, told Turner he was going to leave Barbara Stanwyck for her. When Stanwyck found out, she was devastated. The discovery led to one of the darkest episodes of their marriage. Stanwyck was hospitalized with deep gashes on her arms. The official story, maintained by Taylor for life, was that she had accidentally put her arm through a window. But rumors immediately swirled that a distraught Stanwyck had attempted to take her own life upon learning of her husband's betrayal, a claim Stanwyck herself later denied. According to another account, a furious Stanwyck went to the set to personally warn Turner to stay away from her husband. The affair ended, but the damage was done. The marriage became even more of an empty shell, with the couple frequently separated, especially when Taylor served in the Navy during World War II. When he returned, their incompatibility was more obvious than ever. Stanwyck wanted all of his attention, but Taylor craved escape, preferring hunting and fishing trips with friends, activities she had no interest in. He began to stray again, this time more discreetly, with whispers linking him to other actresses like Ava Gardner and Eleanor Parker. The marriage had become a prison for both of them. He was looking for a way out, and she was desperately holding on to the man she still, despite everything, considered the love of her life. The final blow to the marriage wasn't delivered in their Beverly Hills home, but thousands of miles away, under the Italian sun. In 1949, Robert Taylor traveled to Rome to film the epic Quo Vadis. Freed from the Hollywood press and his wife's watchful eye, he began a brazenly public affair with a young Italian actress named Lea De Leo. This time, there were pictures. Tabloids in Europe and America ran photographs of Taylor and his new paramour, leaving no doubt about their relationship. Back in Los Angeles, a humiliated and enraged Stanwyck booked a flight to Rome, not just to confront her husband, but to deliver an ultimatum. In a move many believe was a desperate, high-stakes bluff, Stanwyck demanded a divorce. She had held on through previous affairs and years of distance. The threat was likely a shock tactic to frighten him back into line. She expected him to beg and promise to end the affair. To her absolute horror, Robert Taylor simply agreed. For years he had privately wanted out, but had always backed down from a confrontation. Now, his wife was giving him the exit he'd long desired, and he took it. The bluff had failed spectacularly. The marriage was over. The official press statement they issued was a masterpiece of Hollywood spin, blaming professional requirements and long separations for the split. The divorce was filed on February 21, 1951, and finalized a year later, ending 12 years of marriage. But the most telling detail was in the settlement. Stanwyck was granted 15% of Robert Taylor's gross earnings until she remarried or passed away. It was a massive financial windfall that she would collect for the rest of his life, ensuring that even as he moved on, a part of him would always belong to her. In the years after the divorce, Robert Taylor seemed to find the life he'd always wanted. In 1954, he married German actress Ursula Thiess, and unlike his first marriage, this one was quiet and centered on family. They had 2 children together, and Taylor largely retreated from the Hollywood lifestyle, preferring life on his ranch. He had finally escaped the gilded cage. Barbara Stanwyck's story was tragically different. She never remarried. The woman who projected such strength on screen spent the rest of her life quietly devoted to the memory of the man who had so readily agreed to leave her. To her, Robert Taylor remained the one true love of her life. As Taylor entered the final years of his life, a lifetime of heavy smoking led to a lung cancer diagnosis. It was during this period, around age 57, as he faced his own mortality, that he reportedly began opening up to close friends and biographers about his first marriage. These weren't public confessions, but private reflections that, when pieced together, painted a devastating picture. He allegedly admitted that the union was never his idea, but that he'd been pushed into it by MGM to manage his image. He supposedly confessed that he had always felt overwhelmed and diminished by Stanwyck's formidable personality. He spoke of a fundamental mismatch that existed from the beginning and admitted that his own fear of confrontation was why he didn't end things years sooner. While he always spoke of her with respect, calling her his greatest teacher, the underlying truth that emerged from these accounts was clear. The marriage was a burdensome performance he had been forced to endure. For many, this was the disgusting truth, that their celebrated love story was a publicity stunt that had trapped him for over a decade. Even after all the pain, a complex bond remained. They maintained a friendship, and even co-starred one last time in the 1964 thriller, The Night Walker. When Taylor was gravely ill, Stanwyck reportedly visited him in the hospital. Perhaps the most poignant testament to her undying love came years after his death in 1969. The cement block at Grauman's Chinese Theatre holding their handprints had cracked. When the theatre offered to let her replace it with one of her own, she refused. She couldn't do it, she explained, because Robert wasn't there to join her, and his prints would be lost forever. She would rather keep a broken memory of them together than create a new one by herself. The story of Robert Taylor and Barbara Stanwyck is a true old Hollywood tragedy. It's a story of how the studio system, obsessed with image and profit, could manufacture a perfect couple while potentially damaging the 2 people inside the frame. Theirs was a marriage born of rumor and studio pressure, allegedly orchestrated to conceal a truth that Hollywood deemed unacceptable. It bound a man who craved freedom to a woman who craved a love she could never truly have. Behind the dazzling smiles and red carpet glamour was a private world of emotional turmoil, betrayal, and profound loneliness. It reveals the devastating human cost of fame in an era when a star's life was not their own. It was a property to be managed, a story to be written, and a lie to be sold to an adoring and unsuspecting public. If you enjoyed this look into the dark secrets of old Hollywood, be sure to like and subscribe for more stories from behind the velvet curtain.